All right, so the reenactment there, that was, that actually happened. Not exactly like we did it in the reenactment, but my son did fall out of a second-story window. He got into a room that was supposed to be locked up, went through the window. The window was open because some paint was drying in there, and pushed through the screen, went out the second-story window. We found him a couple blocks away. He just fell out the window, landed on a flower bed that was covered with landscaping rock, got up and took off, and scared the bejesus out of us. But I ended up finding him a few blocks away, and took him to the hospital. He was okay, thank goodness. Usually a fall like that can leave a kid with some pretty significant injuries. In this case, the ER doc, who we have grown to know incredibly well. I don't think that's a good thing. But he said, normally that kind of a fall brings some pretty significant injuries, spinal injuries, broken bones, and for whatever reason, my son was banged up, but not to that extent. So, given that circumstance, and kind of at the same time, he was starting to show kind of aggression towards physical things, towards the house, punching through drywall. Windows had become a target as well from time to time. Punching, headbutting, whatever. So the windows became a big issue, especially second-story windows. So the windows just got boarded up. Was the initial solution. It wasn't a long-term solution, but it was the house had to be a safe place for my son. So I began thinking about, what am I trying to accomplish here? I need to find a way to secure these windows, but I don't want it to, you don't want the house to feel weird. You don't want it to look odd when people come over, or little kids come over to have a play date with his brother. You don't want, you don't want things to feel odd to anyone else. It's kind of already hard enough as it is to just make sure that your family is accepted the way that it is. So my main concern is, first, secure the window. No falling out of windows. That's always a good general rule. Let's not let our kids fall out windows. Second, make sure the window can't break. If we stop them from falling out the window, but the glass shatters all over the place, we've still got a hazard. We don't want that. So third thing is, don't let the window go away. We don't want a room without windows. We want all of the rooms in the house that have windows to have windows. So how do you block off the window, secure the window without losing the functionality and letting light in and be able to see outside? And, you take the windows out of a room, it turns into a dungeon pretty quick. So the idea that I've come up with at this point is some interior window shutters. A set of 4 shutters. So 2 larger lower shutters and 2 smaller upper shutters. These smaller upper shutters are going to have plexiglass, and the 2 larger lower shutters are going to be padded. So if you open the shutters up, it's just going to be made of wood. And if you close them over the window, you're going to have, 2.5, 3-inch foam padding on it, and upholstered and covered so that it looks nice and it's easy to clean up. And that way you'll always have light in. You can secure that window pretty well. We're going to put some bracing in the window well so that when the shutters close, if the shutters get banged on really hard, it's going to go up against that additional bracing rather than the window itself. And we're going to try and do it pretty cheap. I've not done this before. I don't know if this is going to work, but this is just going to be basically an initial test. We'll see how well it works, how it functions. And with any luck, if it works nice, maybe I'll make a little bit nicer version. But right now, this is kind of an experiment. I'm just going to try and do it on the cheap, and see if I can just put something structurally together that's going to do all those things that we want it to do. And if it works, great. We'll pretty it up, and we'll do another one with a little bit more bells and whistles on it. So, with that said, here's a video on how to do padded window shutters. So here at Adapted Builds, it's not just about helping our loved ones that may have some special needs. We also like to have fun. Sometimes we play a game called Phrase of the Day. Now, if you can count how many times we say this phrase in the video and put it in the comments at the end, we'll enter you into our prize drawing. The phrase of the day is haul a load. All right, everybody, let's get started on these window shutters. We are using Douglas fir, just construction grade lumber. Right now we're going to start out cutting the rails and stiles. That is like the outside frame of the shutters. We are not going expensive on any of the lumber here. I'm not totally sure that this is going to work. For those of you that don't know, rails are the horizontal pieces, stiles are the vertical ones. So we're just cutting out the frame here. Here's a nice little trick. Use your speed square as a stop block for your miter saw. You're gonna have to cut quite a few of these guys, so you can pop that speed square on there and haul a load right through the machine with no time at all. So we're going to pile these rails up here, and now we're going to cut a few other pieces here. Those are stiles for the top 2 shutters. There's actually going to be 4 different shutters. We're making smaller ones up. Oh, genius. Here's a safety tip. Put the glasses on before you start cutting, not when you're done. So now, because we're using construction grade lumber, we're just going to rip the edges off of these pieces. We just want to make sure that everything is uniform. We need things to be relatively precise, a little bit more precise than you sometimes get with just construction grade lumber. And I want to get those rounded edges off just so I can tell just how square everything is when we're putting it together. Now, you wouldn't think that I was an econ major because I apparently can't count to 4. That's enough for one shutter, but I'm going to need 2 more. So now when we're doing our mortise and tenon joints here, we're going to set up a dado stack so that the outside part of that lumber is just the right width away from the blade, and the blade just has to be a little bit larger than halfway, because all we have to do is flip that thing around. We don't have to have the blade the exact width that we need. We can just make sure it's just a little bit bigger than halfway and run it right along the fence there, and then flip it around, and we've got our beautiful little joint cut right there. Now we've got to shave off a little bit of those lips right there. We're going to measure out, make sure we've got the right depth so that we're not too long or too short to fit inside of the joint. The styles there. Now this works the same way. We're going to got the fence set up to make sure we can't go too far over. But our blade is not quite high enough, so we're going to raise it up a little bit. There we go. That looks a little bit better. And I'm a firm believer in don't measure. Just make sure you cut less than what you need and pull it off and try it out. I've always heard measure twice, cut once, and I think the person that came up with that idea was a sadist that wanted people to destroy huge amounts of wood. What I do is cut less than what I need, try it out, come back, and cut a little bit more. In the end, I find that I may have to make a few more cuts, but they end up pretty darn nice in the end. And as you can see right there, that was pretty quick work. I got a nice joint. I think it was a little bit tight for what I liked, so I shaved just a little bit more off here. But now I know that my blade height is perfect to make all of the joints that I need to. Blammo. Take that, Mr. Hendrickson, Mr. 7th grade shop teacher that said I shouldn't be left alone in a room with a bandsaw and electricity. Yeah, that's right. I did that all by myself. What do you think about them apples? D plus Mike Black. Alright, let's move on to the slats that are going to fill up the space between our rails and stiles. Now, I'm just rough cutting these real quick, but we also need to get those rounded edges off, and I want to make sure that I've got just the right width to fit, slide nicely into those mortises that we've cut out. So I'm just gonna cut some edges off of this, make sure we've got a nice square side on that first to begin with. Look, I made paper. So measure it out. We're gonna make sure we've got the right width there over on the table saw. And it doesn't really matter if it's super tight. We don't want it too loose, but we don't want it, super tight. We do want it to be able to kind of just wiggle around a little bit. We don't want it to be a nightmare trying to slide these things in when we get them done. And we're just gonna rip this guy right through here. Whoopity-doo. Exciting for you. Better than a poo. That fell in your shoe. Alright, that other side was just a little bit thicker than that one, so we're going to run it through again. Flip it around. And just like that, we've got 2 slats. Now each one of these slats, we're gonna I just wanted to router the edges. I wanted to just be a little bit curved on the front side. Only one of these sides is gonna show. So we're just gonna do like a 1/2 inch round over bit here with a laminate router. We're gonna go the correct direction with that router as long as we can. We kind of got to go backwards on the back part. We don't really have a choice there, but this is super soft wood. It's gonna want to chip. It's gonna want to get messy with that router, so we're gonna try and just be as careful as we can. But once again, this thing is not meant to be like artwork. We're just trying to keep the window from breaking. We're protecting something, and we don't want it to look like embarrassing. So I'm gonna put together a little dry fit here real quick. Make sure that our slats have been cut to the appropriate size. And if you look really closely, you can see that that joint over there on the bottom right, it does not fit perfectly, but that is actually not a problem because I've built this just slightly large because we're going to be able to come back at the end and clean up all of those outside edges. But what I really want to make sure is that those inside edges are nice and clean. And that last slat needs to be trimmed down just a tad. It's just a little bit more than what we need up there to be able to fit that last style on there. So come over to the table saw, rip that bad boy down. We're actually going to do two of these because we're not just going to cut down the one side, we're going to cut down the other side because we want those slats to be even. We don't want our slats to be kind of looking like they're leaning to one side, because then everyone that looks at our shutters are going to think that they're drunk, and then they're going to be starting to lean sideways, and then they're going to tip over, and then you're going to have an insurance issue, and who needs that kind of a headache? So let's take this last piece over here. Now here's a veteran woodworking tip. When you dry fit your pieces together and you make sure that they fit nice the first time, mark them. You can letter them with an A, a B, a C, and a D. You can use a 1, 2, or a 3. You can even use flippin' Greek symbols. Just make sure that you know which ones are supposed to go together. Because otherwise, you're going to be sitting there looking like a monkey doing a math problem in front of all your neighbors while they laugh at you in their windows. I don't know for sure if that happened, but I don't want to be finding out at Christmas time when everybody else gets good cookies and I get stuck with the crappy gingerbread men because my neighbors have all lost their respect. Well, we're going to tap that away. Looks like we got it to fit here. Now we're going to go back, now that we know everything fits, and we're going to just do a little bit of sanding on those slats for the middle, and we're going to move on to our glue up phase. Now, I prefer to wipe all of my builds down with glue using my finger, because at the end of the day, I like to sit down at night and pretend like I spent the whole day picking my boogers and not wiping them off my hand, and spend, a good 2 to 4 hours picking dry goo off of my fingertips. And if you're like me, you probably need therapy. So, we're gonna glue these bad boys up. Started to rain outside, so we had to move inside. And once again, using our fingertip there, slide these bad boys in. Oh, yep, see? Now this is where that marking the corners thing would have worked, because I suddenly realized that I was putting the wrong pieces together and I would have eventually looked like an idiot. So I've already got the glue on there, so let's move quickly before the stupid thing glues up so much that we can't do anything with anything anymore and I get to start over. But slide them in, plop them around, move quickly. The glue is drying. The glue is drying. The glue is drying. Now this was the other shutter. We hadn't cut this slat down yet, so we got a little bit hanging up there on the top. Mark that bad boy off, take it over to the table saw, and blammo. That's right. Like magic. Glue this bad boy up. Goober our fingers. And now we're going to slide this last piece on. Now, it is important to remember that essentially deep down, we are still all cavemen. Don't go get a brush or use some fancy tool. If you need to spread glue around and you don't want to get your finger filled with splinters from that crack there, just find a random stick and rub it around like a monkey digging for ants. It may take forever, but at the end, you'll feel like a man. Stupid man. But those go together more often than most of us would like to admit, I think. Alright, let's pop that bad boy on there. Check for a little squeeze out. Yeah, got good coverage. Wipe it down like you're changing your pet chimpanzee's diaper. And let's go to clamp them. Now, make sure you're clamping the right spots here, because we don't want to be clamping on the edge of the stiles, because that would just be clamping one piece of wood. Make sure you're getting the rails when you put those clamps on. You want pressure coming in. Also, we don't want to crank the crap out of these things. You don't have to really ratchet it down. You just need a nice firm bit of pressure. And we're going to go back the other direction here. And now here's our gratuitous glue squeeze out shot. This is going to be beautiful. Oh God, yes. Well, that really wasn't that impressive. But there was some squeeze out there, so we're moving on. So I would like to apologize to our more sensitive viewers for the last comment about the squeeze out. Henry brought to my attention that may have had some sexual overtones to it that were completely unintended. And I would like to apologize to everyone that may have been offended by that comment. I'm not a pervert. I just really like glue. Alright, so I'm pulling the clamps off of these. I have glued 3 sides together. You can see that I left that fourth side out, because we're going to have to slide in some plexiglass into this thing. We want to be able to have a little bit of light coming through that window even when it's in protective mode. But there's a big problem here. I cut those mortises for the size of the wood slats, not a thin piece of plexiglass. Why did I do that? Because I am an idiot. Now, this is not a death sentence. We're just going to use some shims. We're going to try and wedge that thing in there. We're going to have to try and kind of fiddle around a little bit. But, you know, if this is the problem that I'm worried about at the end of the day, I'm in great shape. The other thing is, this is kind of an experiment here. I'm not trying to build the final version of this. If this works, I'm going to come back and make a little nicer project out of this. I'm going to use a little bit nicer wood. I'm not going to be using construction grade lumber. So I'm not totally heartbroken that I screwed this up, but this is also a good lesson for everybody else out there. You're going to screw stuff up. You're going to make a little oversight. You're going to do something stupid at some point in time. Get over it. Find a way to fix it and move on. So we're just checking the dry fit here, making sure that everything's going to fit. We're getting ready for our final glue up. I'm going to sit and stare at this thing like a monkey, trying to figure out something I don't even remember at this point. But it doesn't matter. We're going to do this from time to time. Just give yourself some time to think. Work the problem. So we're in glue up now. And rub that around with our finger. apparently from my commentary a minute ago, this may be the most exciting part of the build for me, because apparently I like glue. I don't know. That was weird for even for me. So we're going to put this guy around upside down just to get a little bit more solid base. And we're going to do what I like to call the Bruce Lee tapping method. Look at how fast I can. That's right. That's right. Don't want to mess with me. You see me in a dark alley? I will crush them. I'll hit you 47 times before you even know I'm there. I can move at the speed of a light. So we're going to clamp up that final side. You notice that it's not perfect there. Everything is not lining up super awesome, but that's okay. We're going to come back through. We're going to clean that stuff all up on the table side. So if there's a little bit of a misalignment on the outside, that's great. That's fine. I've already planned for that. I was thinking ahead. Now here is a super awesome trick. I have just got a regular construction site style Bosch table saw. This is not a fancy saw by any means, but if you notice, that fence is square. That's kind of the point of the fence. And if you want a larger fence, you can put a straight edge over far away on the other side, and then put a yardstick in between your square fence and where that other thing should go, and suddenly you have a fence that can go further away than your regular fence can. But you got to do it in two places. So you do it in the edge closest to you, and then on the other side of the table. You clamp both sides of that straight edge down. Voila, temporary fence. So now I can trim off the edges here that are a little bit rough on my shutters. I always like to plan ahead for failure, because it makes it easier to cover up all the crazy stuff that I screw up. So we're gonna just take off just a little bit, shave it down, not trying to go crazy. And we're gonna have to move that fence over just a little bit again to cut the other side, but that's fine because I planned for that. And make sure you don't chop your flipping hand. Now that we've got our edges all trimmed off and cleaned up, we're gonna just try to soften this a little bit. We don't want hard edges. And once again, I'm just gonna use my little laminate router. I'm going to go a little bit the wrong direction and then go most of the way in the right direction. I'm just using a 1/2 inch round over bit. Going to go really slow, soft wood. We're going to try our best not to totally jack this thing up, but this kind of wood does not like to go through a router. So we're going to be as careful as possible. Go slow. Try to control our hand movements. No spasms if possible. If a bee lands on your head, just let it sit there. It's more scared of you than you are of it. It's not always true, but it's always okay to lie to yourself as long as it's useful. So yeah, we're just gonna cruise all the way around here, get a nice soft edge. Don't let the cord get in the way. Get your beard in the router. That would be unfortunate. Maybe go backwards with the router a little bit, even though that's technically stupid. Not sure why I'm doing that, but that's fine. It's all gonna come out in the end. It's what sanders are made for, right? Clean up all those Stupid mistakes. So we're going to keep coming all the way around. And you can see how nice and soft that edge gets. Looks super good. And now it's time for just a little cleanup sanding. So we're not going to go crazy here, but we're just using some 220 grit sandpaper. I like to keep it really super fine at this stage. And now we've got to figure out how to build the padded panel. So the back side of this shutter is going to have just plain wood that's going to be stained that faces the window, and the inside part of the shutter is going to have a big 3-inch pad that covers it, so that if my son decides to have one of his moments and run headfirst into the window, he's going to run headfirst into a very thick pad that will land him gently falling to the floor on his cushy little butt. So first thing I got to do is fill in the gap there from the shutters. It's also important to know that we're not trying to put things in the house that look bizarre to anyone else. You still want the house to conform to what people expect, at least as much as you can, and still have the functionality that you need. So these pads are going to be able to come off, and it'll just look like there's just regular shutters on the window when you're done. So those two panels of MDF are actually going to be what we glue the foam to. They're going to sit over the top of those smaller pieces that we just cut on the table saw a minute ago. Those pieces are the exact same size as the shutters themselves. So cutting down the foam, all you need is just a box cutter. And once you've got the thing cut to square, you just want to take the edges off. It'll make it a little bit easier to do the upholstery on it. Now we're going to take these smaller pieces of the 1/4 inch MDF that we cut, fit inside the shutter, and we're going to glue it to the larger piece that's the size of the whole shutter itself. So we're going to cover this thing in a bunch of goo, wipe it around, and put on that inside piece that's going to sit inside right up next to the slats on the inside part of the shutter. We just don't want to have any gaps in there because it's going to make it easier to break if we have a good collision with that thing. I'm going to screw it down here just for the sake of just making sure that we've got a good bond with the glue and we don't let it slip around. And then we're going to throw something heavy on the top and just let it sit for a day. Now, after it's sat for a day, we're going to start working on upholstery. In this case, what we are going to upholster with is some leftover vinyl that we just had kind of laying around from different stuff that we've done. Fair warning, vinyl is one of the more fun fabrics to do amateur upholstery with. And if there are any upholsterers out there who want to critique what I've done here, please, by all means, I will take all the hints that I can and make sure that you don't staple your fingertip. I legitimately just stapled my finger there like an idiot. That's what that look was for. Corners are always the fun part with vinyl because it's pretty thick and it's tough stuff. But you know what? Even if it does look a little bit amateurish in the end, when you get to wipe it down with a bleach wipe, regardless of what kind of ungodly mess you find, you're going to be happy that you used the vinyl. At least I was happy that I used the vinyl. So just try to find an organized way to kind of pull that over. It's just like making a bed when you're a kid and your parents come in pretending to do their military style bed inspections. What? That's weird? You think that's weird? Your parents didn't do that? So apparently, Henry's parents didn't do that. Apparently, my family is weird, and my parents were a little bit on the obsessive compulsive side. So, sorry, Mom. Apparently, we're weirdos. Not everybody does military-style inspections in the morning before school. So I finally got all sides of this thing stapled down, and we're gonna wipe it off here, make sure it looks nice and pretty, and we're gonna go attach this bad boy to our shutters. But first, we've got to stain these bad boys. And before we stain them, we gotta make sure we can get the cutouts for the hinges fixed up on the side. Now, I'm not going to lie here. I am not a professional woodworker. I am very much just a dad who's trying to get stuff to work in screwy circumstances. And I flat out suck at getting hinges to fit on these pieces. I don't know why. I suck at it. It's horrible. But you know what? That's what I'm worried about at the end of the day. I'm in great flipping shape. So this is just some stain that I picked up from the local big box hardware store. I think they call it Early American. It is a Minwax product. We're just going to mix it up and lather a bunch of this all over this thing until it looks nice and pretty. I'm actually really surprised in the end how nice this stain can get something like crappy construction grade lumber to look. It was a pleasant surprise. So gotta just clean a little bit of the dust off, make sure it's nice and clean when we start. And got a couple scrap pieces of wood underneath. And we're gonna get going on this bad boy. Now when I'm staining stuff, I like to just use a sponge. I'm gonna cover this stuff as best I can. I just slather it on. It's a cool day. It's not too hot outside, so it's not gonna dry on too quick. I want to give it a good coating. I want to get every nook and every cranny, like you're rubbing down your granny, but pretending it was your girlfriend's hand. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're going to hook on just a couple little L brackets to the outside of those pads. We're just going to put 4 of these bad boys on there. That should be enough to secure this thing. We want to make sure we put them in places where they are not going to run into our hardware. I don't want them to be anywhere where my son could bump up against them or snag himself on them. So we're going to put them on along the stiles. I'm going to put 2 on each side, just inside where the hinges go. I'm going to try and keep them the exact same distance apart from the end of the shutter so that we don't look like we're complete slobs. I mean, don't want anybody to be able to come in and put a tape measure on these things and be like, why is one of these 4.5 inches and the other one is 5 inches? Kind of a sloppy maniac review. Those are the kind of people whose opinions matter to me. Which is probably also why I see a therapist on a regular basis. All right, so just need to throw in a couple screws here, and we're going to attach this bad boy on a permanent basis. I did put in some pilot holes because we're dealing with soft wood. We're kind of close to the edge there, so I don't want to run the risk of breaking or chipping stuff out too bad. We're just going to put those screws in solidly, and we've got 2 over on the other side as well. So we're off and running. Now we've got to put a brace on the inside part of the window well, because these shutters are going to be sitting, inside that window well. The hinges are going to be affixed to the window well, and if the shutters get hit from the inside of the room pushing out towards the window, you got to have something there to brace them so they don't just bang into the window frame itself. So we're going to put this brace in here. We're going to just cut down a 2x4 to the appropriate depth of that window well, and then we're going to use the Craig jig here to put a couple of screw holes in here just so we can kind of have like a flush mount. We don't want any screws hanging out. We're going to sand this down, try and make it look as presentable as possible. This is probably the ugliest part about the whole project, but we're going to paint it up white so it fits the trim on the window, and we're just going to try and kind of sneak this in. Now this is what a window looks like after your child has tried to jump out of it. You immediately find a way to quickly secure the thing. You don't really give a crap about what it looks like to the neighbors, and if they start calling your kids Boo Radley, you just kind of have to deal with it. But we're going to take this bad boy off, and I'm going to put up something that looks a little bit more socially acceptable, but gets the same job done. So let's throw up this brace piece first. This is going to secure those shutters, make sure that they don't bump into the window, break the window if they get hit or run into or whatever. And we just need to make sure that that brace allows the shutters to close all the way and everything kind of fits. So this is a little dry fit. It looks pretty good, so we're going to put the brace all the way in place. These screws are going to go up into the framing that goes around that window, and it's always nice to just put in those screws ahead of time before you slide it up there, just so you can have another free hand and you don't have to eat all the screws, for example, that I've got sitting in my mouth right there. It looks like I've got maybe 38, 39 screws. I don't know, I've got a big mouth, so who knows how many I'm sucking on there. But we're gonna just drill these suckers in, make sure they're nice and sturdy, make sure the window still opens. We do want it to still be a functional window. Check it for level. Looks pretty good. All right. Now we got to put finally the hinges on the shutters. I ended up routering out just a couple of slots for the hinges on this, and to be able to attach these things to the window frame like I want to, I'm gonna have to use some larger screws. The screws I'm putting in here are just the regular screws that came with the packet of hinges. That's fine, attaching it to the shutter. But once we start to go into the frame around the window and attach these things up to the wall, we're gonna have to use some longer screws because I want to make sure that they're nice and sturdy and that they're gonna set all the way into those studs that surround that window. I don't want any chance of these things falling off. They're going to have to be pretty tough, and it's going to be really important that wherever we attach here is going to be able to hold the weight of these things, because they are not light. That is one thing that is absolutely important to understand at this venture. When these things are done, they do carry quite a bit of weight, but that's also not too bad because it's going to make them hard for my son to move. So now we're going to actually put these guys up into place. I'm using a couple pieces of vinyl plank flooring that I had just lying around, and I'm just using that to create just a little bit of space underneath this thing, and between this shutter and the windowsill. It's going to be really important that we just give ourselves a little bit of leeway there. We don't want to run, don't want it to be rubbing into anything else. We're going to get one screw in here, and then we're going to check it for level. Make sure that before we put the second screw in up top, that this thing is within appropriate ranges. Level. All right, now don't move it. Hold it. Hold. Now get the screw in quickly before your stupid shaky hands move it again. And check level. We're good. All right. Put some more screws in the other holes. We should be all locked in, ready to go. Now, once we've got both sides attached to the window frame, I need to make sure that I can keep these things shut when I want and be able to open them up when I want. So this is kind of ridiculous, but I don't want to put a big piece of hardware on this, and I don't really have a place to put hardware on the front anyway because it's all padded. So I'm just gonna go with a little hook and an eye hole screw and see if that works. I'm going to put a little hook on either side, put the little eye hole screw in there. That's a look of sheer determination. Put that little tiny screw in there, hooks on, and we'll see how long it takes my son to either figure out that that is there or grow tall enough to be able to screw around with it. Now, after we've got the final top two shutters installed, this is what it finally looks like in the end. We had to cut out a little bit of corners there on the middle and the top shutters so we have room for those eye hooks to set in there, but that's not too bad. I think all in all, it looks pretty nice. And we're going to have to check out here in a second, see what the big guy thinks when Dad shows him the new shutters in his room. Because that's always the opinion that matters. Yeah, do you like it? You want to jump on it? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think if your kid sounds like he's making humpback whale sounds when you slow him down in slow-mo, you did a good job. So, big guy's happy, and that means I'm happy. Whoa, you're going fast. You want me to finish it? Do you want me to do the top part? Okay, well, I'm doing it anyway. What do you think about that?